This is life in Kenya, the wildest country with the village. Where men cannot enter in the heart of East Africa, where the savannah burns under a relentless sun and the echo of tribal drums blends with the roar of lions, there is a land where life seems carved by the hand of nature and tradition. Kenya, that wild and vibrant place, is more than a safari destination. It is a mosaic of ancestral tribes, of rituals marked by the passage of time, and of communities that live amid mystery, sensuality, and a challenge to everything established. Yet hidden within this land is a place where power has changed hands, where men may not enter, and where women have written their own story of resistance, desire, and freedom. It is called Umoja. Before we enter this village forbidden to males, we must set the stage. For Kenya is not merely a land of spectacular scenery and overflowing wildlife. It is a territory where social structures are complex, rigid, and often marked by gender inequality. From the vast plains of the Masai Mara to the snow-capped peaks of Mount Kenya, different tribes maintain codes of conduct dating back to immemorial times, and in many of them the role of women has long been confined to the home, to arranged marriage, and to the duty of pleasing men. Yet not all have resigned themselves. The story of Umoja begins as an open wound on the map of inequality. Founded in 1990, this village arose as a refuge for women who had been victims of violence, humiliation, or abandonment. Its name means unity in Swahili, and at its core lies the radical decision to create a space exclusively for women, no men, no husbands, no chiefs giving orders, only women living together, sharing the labor, the child-rearing, the defense, and above all, the freedom. The result? A community that defies every traditional canon on the continent. But before stepping into Umoja, one must grasp why its existence is a silent revolution. In many rural areas of Kenya, practices such as female genital mutilation, forced marriage, or bride price paid in cattle or money still persist. For a young woman, puberty not only marks the end of childhood but the beginning of a life shaped by submission. Some are sold by their own families for a few cows or traditional jewels. Others are married off to older men who treat them as property. The stories of suffering are many, yet so are those of resilience. Rebecca Lolosoli is the woman who changed everything. A leader of the Samburu community, she was beaten and humiliated for speaking against patriarchal traditions. After escaping an abusive marriage, she founded Umoja alongside 14 other women who shared a similar fate. They began with huts made of mud and dung, with no running water or electricity, armed only with determination. They owned no land, had no state support, only a small patch of territory and the audacious dream of creating an alternative world. What happens when women are freed from outsiders' codes of desire and create their own language of body and liberty? In Umoja, the rules are clear. Men may not live inside the village. They may visit, trade, even converse with residents, but never cross that invisible line separating patriarchy from matriarchy. Here, women raise their children, till the land, sell handicrafts to tourists, and make every communal decision. There are no husbands, but that does not mean there is no desire. Love exists, but not as imposition. If any woman wishes an intimate relationship with a man, she may have one, outside the enclosure. She then decides whether to return. The community imposes no punishments. It simply reminds everyone that the priority is safety and autonomy for all. The aura of mystery around Umoja is no accident. Many inhabitants of neighboring villages watch it with suspicion, even hostility. Some men have tried to sabotage the women's progress, accusing them of destroying tradition. Yet Umoja keeps growing. Today, more than 40 women and their children live there, and the model has inspired other communities across the continent. On nights of the full moon, while other villages hold courtship rituals where men choose and women obey, Umoja sings to life in freedom. Women's chants rise like an incantation against centuries of submission. The fascination of this place lies not only in its uniqueness, but in how its existence questions our ideas about power, desire, and social order. In a region where wives are still bought with goats, cows, or even gemstones, as in Lesotho, Umoja is a different jewel, one whose wealth is measured not in dowries, but in dignity. And yet, not everything is ideal. The women of Umoja face constant challenges, from access to basic resources to ideological siege by local leaders, but they have learned to negotiate, organize, and resist with intelligence. The beauty of this story rests in its humanity. These are not unreachable heroines, but ordinary women who decided that enough was enough. Women who still cook outdoors, who wear colorful necklaces and walk barefoot on the scorching earth, but now do so with heads held high. Women who have transformed suffering into community, exile into resistance, and the body into a sovereign temple. Is there not something profoundly sensual and powerful in that way of living? As one delves into Kenya's tales, one encounters contrasts as poetic as they are brutal. In the same region that celebrates initiation rites of fire, girls flee villages to join Umoja. In a country where tourism sells images of muscular men hunting on the savannah, there exists a village where strength is feminine, subtle, and persistent. Kenya, that wild giant, holds secrets revealed only to those willing to look beyond the obvious. And perhaps the most provocative thing about Umoja is not that men cannot enter, but that women have stopped waiting for permission to be free. A few kilometers east of Umoja, the landscape changes dramatically. Sandy plain gives way to shrub-clad hills, and beyond to forests of acacia and baobab. In these lands, where Maasai herders still walk with long spears and Pokot women weave endless bead necklaces, Umoja's model arouses equal parts curiosity and suspicion. How is life for those left outside this village of strong women, yet whose lives are marked by its existence? In the small Maasai settlement of Oltepesi, men gather at dusk in stone circles around the fire. Some speak in hushed tones of the sisters of Umoja, describing with a mix of admiration and envy how those women live without husbands, making their own choices. For Maasai youth, whose tradition dictates that a man must complete the bull-jumping test before marriage, the existence of a man-free place is nearly inconceivable. Yet several young Maasai women have left home to seek refuge in Umoja after abuse or forced marriages. Their stories travel with them and return as whispers, "If she could leave, maybe I can too." South of that Maasai community, in the Samburu valleys, culture revolves around gaining power through cattle and warrior titles. Men earn prestige through hunting feats and tribal defense. Women, meanwhile, live under strict rules of modesty and obedience. But Umoja caravans have reached these corners as well. Samburu handicrafts, rich in colors and geometric patterns, sell in the women's village, generating income without male intermediaries. With that success, several craftswomen have abandoned the custom of offering their pieces only after their husband's permission and embraced the economic independence promoted by Umoja. Even among Kikuyu populations to the west, where tea farming and livestock breeding form the local economy's backbone, men are surprised to see Umoja's women tending gardens, building rainwater cisterns and running savings and credit cooperatives. In their own village, maize and bean crops are women's responsibility, yet decisions about sales belong to an all-male council of elders. Some Kikuyu women have traveled to Umoja to learn community management methods and return ready to challenge the male monopoly on resources and finances. Beyond the tribes, the region also hosts refugee and migrant settlements from South Sudan or Somalia, where violence and poverty pushed millions across borders. Among them, many women flee gender violence and exploitation, only to discover that patriarchal norms replicate in refugee camps. For these women, Umoja's fame as a sanctuary of autonomy and safety spreads like sacred rumor. There are no husbands to chain you there, no mothers-in-law to decide your life. Thus, the odyssey to reach that village still means crossing dangerous territories, negotiating with smugglers and dodging patrols, making each arrival an act of bravery as intense as it is life-changing. Inside Umoja, the presence of women from diverse backgrounds enriches daily life. Conversations in Swahili give way to stories in Arabic, Nilo-Saharan languages, or Bantu dialects. Mothers teach daughters lullabies learned in Sudan. Young women proudly share traditional Kikuyu verses. Elder Samburu impart lessons on survival in the bush. It is a cultural medley whose common denominator is the quest for equality and the freedom to decide over one's own body and destiny. Residents' autonomy shows in every aspect of community life. Water management, an increasingly scarce resource in Kenya's northern corridor, became a priority. Women formed cooperatives to drill wells, install solar pumps, and build storage tanks. Formerly, men controlled water for irrigation and livestock. Now Umoja provides free water to any woman in need, erasing dependence and coercion once tied to male distribution. With constant water, women introduced nutrient-rich vegetable crops, improving children's diets and reducing malnutrition. Health is another area where Umoja has left an indelible mark. Nearby villages' medical services are scarce or male-dominated. In Umoja, a small health center run by nurses and volunteer doctors from Kenyan universities, offers gynecological care, family planning counseling, and prevention of sexually transmitted diseases. Men may come for vaccinations or general care, but the primary focus is women's and children's health. It is a space where seeking help does not mean judgment, but being heard and cared for. Children's education follows a mixed model. Girls and boys attend a community school where mathematics, English, and Kenyan history are taught, but also values of gender equality, peaceful conflict resolution, and self-esteem. Teachers from Nairobi or faith institutions collaborate with Umoja's leaders to design a curriculum that celebrates cultural diversity and women's contributions to society. Mother's literacy, another key achievement, enables many to read contracts, manage online craft markets, and understand their civil rights. Yet, Umoja's sovereignty has not escaped external pressures. Non-governmental organizations, development agencies, and local governments have tried to insert projects with politicized agendas, sometimes under the guise of aid. Some proposed changing internal governance by imposing male representation quotas. Others offered grants only to mixed cooperatives. In response, Umoja's women learned to assess each offer, accepting resources that strengthen independence and rejecting anything requiring them to abandon self-management. This cautious stance, combined with astute diplomacy, has made the village a respected, sometimes feared, interlocutor for those who wish to impose rules. Nevertheless, Umoja's greatest challenge is long-term sustainability. With more women seeking refuge each year, the village's capacity is strained, land for crops and grazing dwindles, and sanitary facilities struggle with rising demand. To tackle this crisis, leaders proposed an expansion plan, voluntarily acquiring small plots in nearby communal lands and negotiating user rights transfers with tribal councils. Their key argument, demonstrating how Umoja's prosperity indirectly benefits neighboring villages through craft trade, medical and school services, and temporary jobs during well and road construction. Meanwhile, Umoja's fame has attracted documentaries, alternative tourism agencies, and human rights platforms. Though women avoid media exploitation, they use these outlets to tell their version of the story, demanding the world recognize not only their self-governing model, but the injustice that spurred its founding. Each visit is carefully regulated. Tourists may walk certain areas, buy crafts, hear testimonies, but must respect a code prohibiting any comment or gaze that objectifies or demeans residents. This blend of openness and protection has turned Umoja into a beacon of inspiration for women's networks across Africa. Sisters from Tanzania opened a similar project in the Kilimanjaro region. Ugandan leaders have traveled to learn Umoja's water self-management. Nigerian activists have borrowed ideas for their own fights against female genital mutilation. Though the model is not repeated word for word, Umoja's message circulates as a thread of hope. When women unite, even under the harshest conditions, they can redefine power, desire, and territory. No matter how diverse Kenya's landscape, from the shores of Lake Victoria to the desert of Turkana, Umoja proves geography does not dictate destiny. While other towns remain trapped in domination structures, the women of this village have woven a social fabric where every thread is an act of will and dignity. And though the road is long, their example already resonates in unexpected corners, in Nairobi markets, in international forums, and above all in the lives of hundreds of women who, upon learning Umoja's story, dare to dream of their own freedom. Thus, in the wildest land of Africa, where great mammals roam endless plains and warriors prepare for rites of passage, there exists a village where men may not enter. Far from being women's exile, it has become a sanctuary of resistance, a laboratory of equality, and a territory where the word unity gains its fullest meaning. For in that remote corner of Kenya, the silence of the lions and the song of women have woven a new way of life, wild, beautiful, and free. High in the Himalayas, where mist covers paths like a veil dividing the earthly from the divine, there is a monastery that appears on no map. Its entrance is carved into living rock, and its existence is but a whisper among the boldest travellers. Here, the monks not only pray but guard ancient manuscripts speaking of forbidden knowledge, the art of sensual energy as a route to enlightenment. Central to this knowledge is the concept of maithuna, a tantric practice in which the body becomes a temple, desire a sacred fire, and pleasure a language connecting humankind with the absolute. Yet the maithuna taught here is no common sexual experience. It is spiritual alchemy. Every movement, every breath, every touch is encoded with centuries of tradition seeking to transmute the carnal into transcendence. This monastery, known in code as Dawa Lanka, was founded by an enigmatic figure named Tashi Dorje, a sage who journeyed eastward from Kashmir carrying a set of golden codices. They spoke of the 8 thresholds of the body, energetic points that, when awakened through ritual touch, trigger inner visions, ancestral memories, and connections with higher planes. Unlike the strict celibacy observed in other temples, here eroticism is not suppressed. It is studied, channeled, honored. It is not an impulsive act, but a rite guided by silence, symbols, and guttural chants. Initiates may not begin their training without passing through the Night of 1,000 Vows, a ceremony in which they swear to use this knowledge only for awakening, never for power or manipulation. Those who have crossed Dawa Lanka's gates recount experiences bordering on the miraculous, hours-long states of ecstasy, lucid dreams in which they converse with future selves, and visions of temples floating upon golden clouds. All this, they say, brought on not by substances but by the communion of bodies that touch not with lust but with reverence. One of the most intriguing accounts comes from a French anthropologist named Lucien Montfleur, received as an external observer in 1937. What he witnessed marked him forever. He described an octagonal hall carved in white jade beneath a dome open to the sky. There, couples danced in slow motion to faint drums amidst columns covered in phallic symbols and entwined serpents. There was neither shame nor disorder, only a collective trance where the human seemed to dissolve. Lucien wrote in his diary, "It was not pornography. It was a prayer with skin, a wordless language where each gesture was a psalm. And I understood, perhaps for the first time, that desire may also be a form of prayer." His testimony was confiscated by British authorities upon his return to Calcutta, yet a copy was hidden within a Tibetan library's walls, later rediscovered by historian Lamo Yutso. She devoted her life to protecting these documents threatened by Chinese occupation. Lamo penned an essay titled "The Bodies That Pray," asserting that many tantric traditions were systematically silenced because they granted individuals a power independent of any religious institution. Beyond the mountains, echoes of these rituals linger in other cultures. In northern Laos tribes there are mating dances where men and women, blindfolded with embroidered bands, seek each other through scent and touch. No words, only breath. It is said that those who find each other unseen will be united souls for 7 lives. Elders claim that monks from the east once descended clad in maroon robes, speaking of a dance joining bodies and destinies. On the island of Bali, the Sankyang Didari trance endures. Young virgins, guided by drum rhythms, are possessed by deities and dance movements imitating the union of masculine and feminine within themselves. Experiencing the trance before marriage is seen as a blessing, purifying and preparing the soul for true love. Some scholars believe this rite also has tantric roots adapted to the Hindu Balinese worldview. This network of rituals, dances, and hidden codes points to a forgotten truth, that sexual energy, far from being dirty or mundane, can become a sacred force when guided consciously. It is not libertinism but freedom, not hedonism, but connection with the eternal through the joy of the moment. In many modern temples, such wisdom has been replaced by dogmas dividing body from soul, desire from spirit. Yet for Dawa Lanka's guardians, that division is a dangerous lie. The body is not the soul's enemy, states an initiation mantra. It is its map. Even in the West, some schools reclaim fragments of this knowledge. In Berlin, a secret community of tantric practitioners offers sensory meditation sessions where strangers sit face to face for an hour without speaking, only breathing together, sharing gaze and silence. Testimonials speak of spontaneous tears, unlocked memories, and a sense of touching something eternal. In these spaces, the goal is not physical climax, but the awakening of something subtler, recognizing divinity in the other. And this, say the masters, is the true secret. Not pleasure for its own sake, but pleasure as gateway, as path, as illumination. Yet such knowledge is not without risks. Misused, it can lead to obsession, rampant ego, or emotional manipulation. Thus, ancient sages established strict rules. Never teach one whose intention is impure. Never practice without first anchoring the mind. Never use this art to control or subjugate. In the words of Master Tashi Dorje, only the one who can love without possessing, touch without demanding, and surrender without losing oneself is ready to enter the temple of the sacred fire. Today, spiritual descendants of Dorje continue to meet in secret retreats in Nepal, Bhutan, and even parts of Japan. There they rediscover the power of gestures, glances, and mantras whispered at the ear like keys opening portals within the soul. And while the world races toward technology, algorithms, and physical disconnection, atop those sacred mountains a small group of human beings remembers what the rest has forgotten, that some knowledge cannot be digitized. Wisdom transmitted only skin to skin, breath to breath, gaze to gaze. A code burning softly like a candle in the night, guiding seekers toward the truth that cannot be written, only felt. Thus, the code of hidden pleasures continues to vibrate in the shadows, waiting to be discovered by those daring to look beyond flesh and see the spirit dancing behind it. In Kenya's arid north, where red dust coats the skin like a second layer and the sun smites without mercy, female resistance has been not only a silent cry, but a movement deeply rooted in the traditions that once oppressed them. This chapter takes us beyond the famed village of Umoja, into the rise of new communities, projects, and forms of expression led by Kenyan women who, far from resigning, have built alternatives as bold as they are symbolic. One of the most notable transformations has occurred in Marsabit County, a region traditionally marked by nomadic herding and patriarchal structures. There, a group of Rendille women created a network called Namayana, the word of the woman in their language, an intercommunity council discussing reproductive rights, education access, and mediation in tribal conflicts. Their structure draws inspiration from ancient councils of elders, but adapts to a feminine vision of leadership, horizontal, participatory, spiritual. Such organization has gained strength, especially where domestic violence and female genital mutilation persist, not just as practices but as cultural legacies hard to eradicate. In response, Namayana launched alternative ceremonies to mark the passage from girlhood to adulthood without physical violence. In them, young women learn self-esteem, menstrual health, bodily autonomy, and female leadership in circles of speech and song, evoking both ancestral and revolutionary. Resistance also flourishes in art. In Nairobi, a wave of women artists use body and performance as protest. One prominent figure is Achieng' Owino, a contemporary dancer who created a choreography called Ngoma ya Mwili, the dance of the body, denouncing patriarchal abuse through movements inspired by Luo ritual dances. Her show has toured universities and public squares, becoming a modern rite of collective empowerment. Likewise, poets such as Wanjeri Gakuru bring Swahili and local dialects into spoken word, blending African mythology, abuse experiences, and emancipation dreams. One of her best-known poems, Mbegu ya Moto, Seed of Fire, was inspired by a visit to Umoja and has been translated into more than 10 languages. Politically, the women's movement has also begun to gain force. In the 2022 elections, Kenya achieved the highest number of elected women in its history, with figures such as Linet Chepkorir Toto, only 24 years old, becoming a symbol for thousands of young women who see in her the possibility of a different country. Though the road is long and cultural resistance deep, these gains mark a paradigm shift. Woman is no longer only mother or wife. She is leader, voice, future creator. Finally, the role of technology cannot be ignored. Thanks to the spread of mobile phones and social networks, rural women are beginning to connect, sharing testimonies.